Good morning. Good to see you. Thank you. Appreciate your attendance. As Ryan was saying, as we were preparing for the Lord's Supper, you make individually, you make worship what it is, and the joy, the peace, the hope, the excitement. God knew what He was doing in creating the church and commanding that we be together. The encouragement that you give me cannot be overstated. So thank you for being here and being that for me. If and you might not be like this, okay? But I hopefully want to capture your minds this morning and in the place where they are. And your mind might not be there. So if it's not, forgive me, but just humor me by not sleeping. Okay. But at our house, all the talk and the rumors are about Christmas. When is Christmas? How much longer? How many more days until Christmas gets here? Santa. Is Santa coming? What is he going to bring me? Several presents have already arrived from Amazon. That's where presents come from nowadays. And the joy, the joy and the excitement and anticipation over Christmas. It's 9 days away, 10 days away, I guess. And there's a lot of excitement. And maybe as you've gone out, right, into different places, maybe you've seen, captured, and can feel the excitement in the air. Maybe you've waited in those lines that are out to the back of the store. Or maybe you've seen how empty the grocery stores are as everybody's kind of in that same mode. It seems like there's a lot of people in that mode anticipating Christmas. And rightfully so. I mean, this is something that we all experience together, and it happens once a year, and it's an exciting time for a lot of different reasons. Maybe it's family, maybe it's presents, maybe it's just the time with our friends, and maybe it's just a day off from work. Whatever you're excited about, most everybody feels that same type of anticipation. And I saw that little fella or little girl, and I was like, I Google search anticipation. That came up. And I was like, you know what? There's a lot of people probably can share that sentiment. But as Christians, okay, capturing that and translating it to hopefully a spiritual application is that we have a better day, a greater day than Christmas on the way. We are anticipating, we're looking forward to the day when we can be with God. Right? We're looking forward to the day when we can experience the bliss of heaven, the freedom from pain and agony and sorrow that this like we are looking forward to. Not I mean, it's not Christmas. It's a lot better than Christmas. We're looking forward to Judgment Day, the day when all this is going to be dissolved. So I want to focus and kind of change our mindset, at least for just a few minutes, as we think about anticipating that day. We're going to look at three different scriptures and camp out there for just a few minutes in at each one. And as we anticipate that day, anticipate the coming day, ask 3 questions in that regard. And the first one that I wanna pose to you is, who would you tell, right? If you knew that in 10 days, just hypothetically, if you knew that in 10 days, the Lord was coming back, and that all this life, everything that is here that we see, all of it was gonna be gone, and we were going to stand before God in 10 days, who would you tell? You know, we've taken the kids outside the house a couple of times, and every time that we go out, strangers, complete strangers, okay? Complete strangers come up and say, "Oh, have you been good boy? Have you been a good girl?" And our kids look at him like, "What in the world are you talking about?" But are you on the naughty list? Are you on the nice list? Is Santa going to come see you? Right? They get all those questions. What do you want for Christmas? What have you asked Santa for? And you know, our kids, they give them those blank stares like, "Why are you talking to me?" But it's that same throughout. It's strangers coming up, and it's the same repeated thought because they're anticipating, right? They're anticipating Christmas. So and I've been thinking about that. So if in 10 days we knew that Jesus was going to come back, the world was going to be over, and eternity, I guess it's begun in a sense, but eternity for us, we're never going to die, okay? In 10 days. Who would you tell? Would it be like the stranger at Walmart or where the grocery store? You're standing in line and you look over and say, "Are you ready? What are you talking about? Are you ready for what?" Would you have this same sense of urgency and desire just to have a random conversation with someone that you see and ask them, "Hey, are you looking forward to it? Are you dreading it? Are you ready for Jesus to come?" I mean, it's a whole lot more important question than, "Are you ready for Santa?" Who would you tell? There's this story in Luke chapter 16 that you probably heard, you're probably familiar with, but in Luke chapter 16, Jesus, in this particular situation, before he gets into this story about the rich man and Lazarus, he's addressing the Pharisees. And Luke records for us a very specific and important statement to set up this story. In verse 14, he said, "The Pharisees, who were lovers of money, heard all these things and they ridiculed him." All right, in that context, Jesus tells about in verse 19, where we're going to start, and we're going to read through the rest of the chapter. So just hang on. Jesus says, "There was a rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate was laid a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who desired to be fed with what fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, even the dogs came and licked his sores." The poor man died in verse 22 and was carried by the angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. And in Hades, verse 23, being in torment, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus at his side. And he called out, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip the end of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame." But Abraham responded. Abraham in verse 25 said, "Child, remember that you in your lifetime received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in anguish. And besides all this, between us and you a great chasm has been fixed, in order that those who would pass from here to you may not be able, and none may cross from there to us. Now pay careful attention. Verse 27. And he said, then I beg you, Father, send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, so that he may warn them, lest they also come into this place of torment. But Abraham said, they have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. And he said, no, Father Abraham. But if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent. Then the last verse in the chapter says, he said to them, if they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced if someone should rise from the dead. Who would you tell? I've seen throughout, I don't know, people that I've seen, different people counting down. The other day, I saw someone wearing a shirt with a number, and the number was the days until Christmas. You know, we've got, if we knew that in 10 days the Lord was coming back, would we have a countdown? I've been thinking about it. Would we have a countdown, anticipating and excited and getting ready? And who would we tell? Here, Lazarus is asked by the rich man to go and raise from the dead and tell his brothers. Would we be that bold? I know many of us have family members that aren't religious in any capacity. Would we be so anxious to say, hey, Jesus is coming back in 10 days. You need to get your life right. You need to be ready for when Jesus comes back. Or would we be just as passive as we tend to be right now? I don't know, at least I hope that we would be much more aggressive in sharing the news that Jesus is coming back. Even with strangers, family, friends. I went through the directory. And if you haven't heard the announcements the last 6 weeks, there's a new directory back in the foyer. I went through the directory and I counted 72 different entries. 72 different entries in the directory. What if? Crazy thought. What if those 72 different entries told one person, or brought one person, one per family unit, brought one person to Christ next year? This year's we're getting pretty short. That's 72 different people. Wouldn't that change the dynamic of everything? As we see the day and Jesus is coming back, we know he's coming back sooner today than he was yesterday. We don't know the precise date. But what if we shared the gospel? One. I'm sure each of us know one person that we really, really want to come to church with us. Maybe that's a challenge for next year. Question 1, who would you tell? All right. Then question number 2 that I'd like to pose to you, if we knew, right? If we knew that Jesus was coming back in 10 days, what would you do different? Is there something in your life that you would do differently than you're doing right now? I think most of us would, right? I mean, if we're thinking about Santa coming, preparing for Santa to come to our house, right? If we're doing that or preparing for Christmas, however it is, there's probably some things that we would do different. Maybe we're hoping for the first time in our life to get on the nice list. And we don't do this at our house, but I know maybe you do. A few years ago, there came out this idea to buy this elf. All right. To buy this elf. If you've never heard of this, it's craziest thing. All right. You buy this stuffed elf and you put him on a shelf. It's called an elf on a shelf. And the idea behind this elf, follow me, okay? The idea behind this elf is that he reports back to Santa whether you've been good or bad. Now, I know that there's a lot of parents that, boy, they re- they're really into that elf because it changes the child's behavior. You better be good. So and so, buddy the elf is watching you. Are there things that we would do different? Like even like we'll change, our children will change, grandchildren will change, and hopefully be better because they know that Santa's coming. Are there things in our life? If we knew that Jesus was coming in 10 days, all right? If Jesus was coming, are there things that we would do different? Would we straighten up and act the way that we're supposed to, knowing that he's watching us, he's doing everything, or he's reporting everything that we do? Would we, would we be doing something different than we are right now? I don't know. It's an interesting thought, isn't it? Look at this passage with me. Excuse me, in the book of Matthew, in chapter 24, and this whole chapter, or most of this chapter, comes on the heels of the disciples asking Jesus a question. Back in Matthew chapter 24, verse 3, it says, as sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? The stones of the temple thrown down? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" So at the end of this chapter in Matthew chapter 24, talking about the end, the coming of Jesus, he says this beginning in verse 42. Therefore, stay awake, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. But know this, that if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would have not let his house be broken into. Therefore, you also must be ready. For the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. What would you do different? If you knew that, the saying, we sing it, right? He's making a list, checking it twice, gonna find out who's not here nice. If we really thought that God was in heaven making a list, checking it twice, God, right? What would we be doing different? Because the reality is that he is up there. He is seeing everything. It's not an elf. It's not a fictional character. It is God, the God of heaven, and he is watching. Does that reality change how we live, change what we do, change how we think. Does knowing that God is the all-seeing, omniscient God change what we do? If we knew, for instance, if we knew that he was coming in 10 days, would we be more prepared? Would we stay awake? Would we anticipate him coming? What would we be doing differently than we are right now? And hopefully the answer to all these questions is nothing. I wouldn't tell any more people than I've already told. Or I wouldn't be doing anything different. And if that's the answer, then that's great. But for me, I know that if I knew that the Lord was coming back in 10 days, there's some things that I would try to be better about. There's some people that I would tell them till I was blue in the face. We need to understand the reality of the spiritual world that we're a part of. The master of this house, if he had known that the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake. He would have been better prepared than he was. Which, I mean, chapter 24, really here in Matthew, it leads to, and it kind of all hinges on that idea of preparation, which leads me to the third question. How would you prepare? Right? If you knew Jesus was coming back in 10 days, how would you prepare for him to come? You know, we get ready, right? We get ready for Santa, don't we? Maybe you don't. I don't know. At our house, we do. Santa likes cookies. A lot of cookies. Sugar cookies, if anybody's interested. Santa likes milk. We make a list. Santa, this is what I want. We write a letter, a note to Santa. Thank you. Santa leaves us something. We're excited. Maybe it's making sure that everything's right. The stockings are all right. And we can, Santa will stuff those stockings full of presents. Maybe it's you're wearing your pajamas, waiting for Santa to come, or opening up that one present from somebody else other than Santa. But if we knew that Jesus was coming back, I don't know if he likes milk and cookies, but what would we do to prepare for him to come back? What different preparations would we be making in our life? Let's go back to Luke. In this time, we looked at Luke chapter 16, the rich man and Lazarus. Let's go back a couple of chapters in chapter 14. Jesus tells another parable here. As he's reclining in this house for a meal. He says that we're gonna start in verse 15. 115. We're going to start in verse 15. When one of those who reclined at table with him heard these things, he said to him, "Blessed is everyone who will eat bread in the kingdom of God." Verse 16. But he said to him, "A man once gave a great banquet and invited many. And at the time for the banquet, he sent his servant to say to those who had been invited, 'Come, for everything is now ready.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said to him, 'I've bought a field and I must go and see it. Please have me excused.' Another in verse 19 said, 'I have bought 5 yoke of oxen and I must go and examine them. Please have me excused.' And another said, 'I have married a wife and therefore I cannot come.' So the servant came and reported these things to his master. Then the master of the house became angry and said to his servant, 'Go out quickly to the streets and the lanes of the city and bring in the poor and crippled and blind and lame.' And the servant said, Sir, what you command has been done, and still there is room. And the master said to the servant, Go to the highways and the hedges and compel people to come in, that my house may be filled. For I tell you, none of those who were invited shall taste my banquet. If you knew that Jesus was going to come back in 10 days, how would you be preparing? They knew that this banquet was coming. They had been invited. They had received the invitation, but when the invitation came, they began to make excuses. You might say they weren't prepared. 3 excuses, 18, 19, and 20. The first excuse was, I have bought a field and I must go out and see it. Please have me excused. The pride and possessions. Excuse number 1. I have something more important. Excuse number 2. And another said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I must go and examine them. Please have me excused. He had some work that he needed to do, and he'd rather work than go to the banquet. Verse number 20. And another said, I've married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. It's almost comical, isn't it? I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. His relationship was more important than the invitation. You look at those 3 on the screen, you see a sad reality of the world that we're a part of. The invitation in Matthew chapter 11 and verse 28, Jesus says, Come to me, all who are laboring and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. We know that. The invitation is for all, for everybody. Rest is there. But so often, what we see are excuses, right? People who aren't prepared because they have pride in possessions. What do I need this for? I've got everything that I need. They look around at all the things that they have, and they think, I don't need Jesus. I don't need the church. I don't need these things. Or maybe they look at their work, and they put their work above their relationship with God. I have to do this because I have to make money so that I can fill in the blank. Or maybe they look at their relationship that they have with whoever. I can't be a part of God's church because of my parents or my spouse or my friends. What would they think? They're not prepared. If we saw and knew on the calendar in 10 days Jesus was coming back, would any of these excuses matter? Would our work matter? Would our relationship with our family matter? Would our possessions or the things that we own, would it matter? What would matter in life? We anticipate Santa, December 25th, far more than we anticipate Jesus coming back. I think, and hopefully the challenge this morning is that let's regain a spiritual focus. I know we get caught up in the holiday season and everything but let's think about Jesus. Let's be excited in Jesus. And maybe there's somebody that you need to tell about Jesus coming back and getting right with God. Maybe you're going to tell somebody else. and change their destiny forever. Or maybe you get rid of excuses and start preparing for what actually matters. You see, in this passage, in Luke chapter 14, in this parable, the invitation is given like it's about to be. The only difference between those who go and enter into the banquet and those who are on the outside is how they respond to the invitation. If you need to respond this morning, won't you do that as we stand and as we sing?